Hello there. I'm getting in the practice of dropping chat messages to announce getting started. I'm using Streamlabs to stream to Twitch, YouTube, X, Kick, and Instagram. I'll figure out TikTok here soon. Okay, there we go. Twitch was not pulling up there. I don't see a YouTube message pop up, so let me drop one in there. And I don't know how to get to the X.com stream chat. I really wish all of it streamed through Streamlabs here, but it seems that only Twitch and YouTube are the only two out of the links that I have set up through Streamlabs to my profiles. I'll get it figured out one of these days. It's not priority right now. I can still manage. So let's get started. Let's get started with our ink wash study, our figure study. And then we'll move into the comic book stuff. So where I left off yesterday, I don't is that it over there, or was it a different one? Don't have yesterday's figure study, but here's yesterday's work with the Mission Decontrol comic strip. Oh, there's my timer. This is where I've sort of sketched in a rough layout of things, checking composition, writing in dialogue, narration. There's really only one example of onomatopoeia sound effects, but I also want to make sure that the title panel that I have up here looks good, and I have a change in mind for this. Instead of his headshot, which it's okay to make changes along the way. That's the whole point of me doing this, just being really flexible with how this is created. I'm not going to be too specific about things. I'm open to different ideas, especially if I get feedback from anybody. I really appreciate it. I love that sort of support and help. That's why I'm sharing it with whatever community wants to come in and hang out. But I have everything laid out, and I'm excited to get back to that, but I do want to get into just a short, maybe half hour of study. And we have our watercolor paper block. I have a reference here that's from, let's see, do I have it pulled up here? Let me tell you where I found this from. I did find it on Pinterest and doing a Google search and stuff. I've seen it around, but doing a copyright search on the current reference that I have up here on the screen that you see on the right, or the upper right, which is a cool example of nice midtones with deeper shadows and some strong highlights there that you see on his lower back. It's a cool, easy pose, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it, just practicing with anatomy, with proportions, which I was way off yesterday with proportions. Let me get my reference up and ready. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to say where it came from. This image comes from Human Anatomy for Artists.com, which website is up. Looks like an old website. Be careful with the websites that you do find your references with. some post their images and some have the intention of posting their images for you to purchase. So some are available for free, and I try to find those. None of these are purchased, but I do notice that some of the reference photos in the packs being sold by these resource groups and websites tend to be shared through Pinterest and stuff. So I want to make sure I credit the proper source. I do appreciate other artists sharing what they find, and maybe it's something out of something they purchased and they're sharing that. I try not to credit that because it's monetized in a way. But so this is from their website, humananatomyforartists.com. I think it's a hyphen in between each word. And let's get started. Let's pencil this in. All right. And again, here over on Twitch, YouTube, Kick, X, and Instagram, I'm going to be running today for a couple of hours until I need to get up and go and be off somewhere else. So I'm going to do as much as I can within that bit of time. I may do some work offline, but if I do, I'll share that information with you when I come back in. The music you're currently listening to, this is going to be light, hard to see at first. This guy reminds me of a He-Man figure, toy figure by the way. The music that you're listening to, unfortunately, is AI generated. It's the only thing that I have, where I have to rely on that kind of source. Just to play some music in the background, as heavy metal and, you know, rock and having some music playing is pretty integral to just sort of how my imagination works with visual art that other people can see. That leg needs to be bigger. One of the issues I ran into yesterday had to do with overall proportions of the figure that I was working with. And I think it had to do with the way my table was angled. I think my table was just a little bit too flat to my horizontal surface, and thus, you know, was warping what I was looking at. I think that was one thing, plus just my practice. Just practice in observing sources, and translating it to paper. And sharing that process with the art community. If you follow me over on, you know, TikTok and X and Instagram and other socials, Facebook, I post clips and highlights of what I stream. Sometimes it's to share the process, sometimes it's just to be a little bit more open about what I'm doing. I use these videos that help me, look for jobs to share with other people what I do. All right, let's take a look at this. Let's kind of back up for a moment, because I'm starting to exaggerate a little bit. And what I mean by exaggeration is, since I love to do comic book type of art, I see the back of this dude, he's like the Hulk or something. What I'm doing a little bit different today compared to yesterday, one thing is I am going to go ahead and use my pencil to shade in. Okay, here's the point where, right here, it should be right above just the inside of his hip, and I have this sort of curl out too much. So I either need to bring his shoulder in, or I need to bring his hip out. Okay, and then shape this out. Need to bring this tricep area. Bicep area, forearms. I think I'll go ahead and erase little bits here and there. I've marked in, areas of shading. Not capturing the triangular shape of, this wider top to a more narrow waist as well as I should. So I'm going to go ahead and use the opportunity and correct what I can. Excuse me. I like this part right here where there's darkness in the back of the knee, but then the top of the calf creates this hard edge. I like trying to identify those harder edges versus softer edges. I think that's some of the most challenging. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. One thing here is I don't have his foot back far enough. So I'm going to use my pillow here to gently remove. I think this was fine right here, but his heel should be here. Toes are just above. Let's see, this back elbow should line up with roughly with his knee here. It doesn't. Okay. It's because I don't have my leg. Let's go ahead and correct that. That looks better. Careful right there. Nope, I don't want to shade in too much here. That does look better after I adjusted the leg. A lot of lighting in here on the back leg. Looks like there's a lot of force or a lot of weight on that front foot there, his left foot. He's got a big sort of wrinkle right there at the top of his foot. Alright, I don't want to put too much time into this. I want to get to the goal of completing out the figure as quickly as I can. But let me I want to step back and take a look at this. Stream Hub World. That's a cool. I like that little emote, color emote thing that's in the chat that you posted. Alright, looking at what you see there, I'm glad you can see enough of it. You get a sense of, you know, what I've laid out on here. A little bit of that in there. Just kind of using my pencil to hatch in some areas. That's a really cool shadow shape right there on his calf. Back leg right there on the left side of the calf. It's just like this chunk of shadow. It looks cool. As we're wrapping up on using our pencil to lay things out, what sort of trying to think of what is going on in this scene. I have that part a little too much there. What's he doing? It looks like he's creeping up on something. I think in my drawing, I don't have his head forward as much, and I'd like to correct that. Because I think one of the things that implies he's sort of creeping up on somebody is his head is stretched out the way it is. and his hands reaching out. Oh, you know what, man, I got so lucky with this reference. He's only got one hand visible. Get rid of this line. It's just gonna distract me. I put it there, I can take it away. Alright, let's get these neck wrinkles in. Ear. At least a sense of a nose. His face has a lot of darkness in it, so it's like he's creeping into the darkness. Bright light is behind him. This is definitely a pretty cool pose for potential for like a comic book kind of thing. Alright, let's move on. I want to shape his head a little bit more properly. All right, there we go. Alright, are we ready for some ink wash? Let's give it a shot. Let's get that on there. I'm going to go ahead and sign it here. Since that tool's in my hand. Excellent. Same thing as yesterday, where we're gonna lay down a nice dark mid-tone, not real dark. Put my scrap paper down. In case it gets a little messy. In fact, you know what? I can't do that. I got too much of an angle on my table here. Water is not going to work on that, so. Let me get in a little bit closer with the camera and do a focus check. Sitting this window up here. Have to have all sorts of little windows open. Gonna apply it, but keep it off to the side. Okay, lots of back and forth. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let's move this just a little bit over here. Some things cutting off, but we got the majority of it. Alright, nice. Yeah, I'm sorry it's at a weird angle, so what you guys see isn't as straight as I have it here. I'm pretty happy with how I've started it out. I could spend all day, you know, shading it in and drawing in details and stuff, correcting any areas that aren't quite balanced. Learning a little bit more as I go, but I want to get these done in a short amount of time and do as much as I can within that time frame. Let me set up my water and ink. You know what? Can I share that? Well, as long as I don't break my camera. There we go. Alright, I may have the saturation or brightness levels on that camera a little bit dark. That way it's easier for you to see pencil drawings. But just like yesterday, I'm going to pour a little bit of clean water. Yeah, my palette's a little bit dirty too. A little bit, right? We're going to throw in some Higgins brand Black Magic ink, waterproof, which makes it a challenge to work with as a watercolor. And we're going to use a couple of bubbles of ink. One of them will get a little bit diluted with water at some point. And what we're going to start off with is for the brush, just a cheapy synthetic brush. Here's my water ink. Let's do one more thing. Let's do one more thing. Let's take a little brush, a short brush, still nice and pointy, and we'll get the brush wet, dry it off on a paper towel a little bit. I'm gonna just barely touch the little pool of ink. And then I'm going to go into this middle pool of water and dilute it with the ink. Let me clean off the ink that I've transferred to the brush. Need to keep this ink mix mixed up because the ink will collect at the bottom and it'll mess up the intensity of your ink wash. Just sort of like I went over a little bit as I was doing this. Ink wash is very unforgiving. Doesn't act the same as watercolor. Alright, let's get this back on. I think that's about where I had it. If I want to double check, I can put something in here to use to test. Let's just make sure our focus is good. I think that's good. Brush. Test strip. Where did you go? I'm going to get my brush wet first with clean water. I'm going to see how intense this actually is. It's not. Not at all. So I'm going to borrow a little bit more ink. Sorry, I don't have a camera showing what I'm doing. Just adding a little bit more ink to that mid-tone. Ooh, that is dark for sure. I must have a pool of ink in that, on that side of the brush. So clean it off a bit. Just going back and forth between adjusting the intensity of gray. Okay, I like that. Getting something like this here, kind of hard to tell with all the other colors on there, but let's throw it on. And if it covers up my pencil, then so be it. We'll let it dry and see if it sort of helps bring out the pencil, because it's really, really hard to see. Yeah, maybe too much. Yep, probably too much. I can see his, I can see part of the head and so forth, but I don't have enough of the pencil showing through, so I may need to redraw it. That's okay. I can see part of it here, but we'll let this dry. Which typically, once it's dry, its intensity has been, it's not quite as intense. So more of the pencil will show up. Trying to look at, like, you can barely see the pencil here and over here. So this tone was a little too dark. If it was just a tad bit lighter, like in this area here, and I didn't pre-wet the paper. So what I'll do, put my brush away, no problemo. Need to get a dull knife here to separate my top sheet. And then what I'm going to do is find a really good mid-tone example here, just to play around a little bit, and then I'll move on to the comic book. I go through and find my top sheet. Excuse me. There we go. I'm going to set this right here. Alright, cool. I'll leave that alone. I'm going to pour some more clean water. Get my big brush. Let it sponge up as much water as I can get. And then I'm just going to quickly throw this water around on the paper. There's a little bit of gray mixed in there. I want to make sure that water is evened out. I don't always have to use a brush to apply the water. I could probably use a paper towel or just a literal sponge, and that way I have more uniformity in where the water is going. Just seeing some dry areas. Okay. Alright, I'm going to try a ink wash. I'm going to fill up my brush. I'm going to blow on the paper a little bit. For luck. And I'm not working with the figure. I'm just creating a shape. Nice hard edge. Gonna let this dry. I think I have enough here. Okay. Whoops. Gonna let this next layer application dry just a little bit. I'll sit there and blow on it if I have to. Let's take a look at this after it's dried a little bit. Looks like I covered up too much of the drawing. That's okay. I'm going to keep it off to the side and redraw it. Excuse me. And redraw it here on the paper. But I really need to see if I can remap out some of it, because a lot of it's covered up to the point where it's like, well, I can't really see where it's gone. That's okay. Alright, this is dried up a bit. I'm going to go into the same ink wash intensity. I'm going to do another on top. And see if I can kind of softly blend it into the lighter area here. That looks nice. So I'm sort of demonstrating a bit better control here. Let's see if I can sponge up this water. Or spread it back out. Since I'm at a bit of an angle, it is going to kind of drip down. And I don't want it to drip down too much. There we go. Looks like I got a new scrap piece of paper. That's alright. Alright. Gonna add another layer. I'm just gonna keep adding in intensities of dark gray until I get the darkness that I want. There we go. I'm starting to like this real hard edge down here. Let me add in some form here in this top part of the shape. Try to get a little bit of texture in there. Let's go ahead and get rid of the reference so we're not confused about what exactly we're working on here. I'm going to go just directly to this. I'm going to keep my comic book references up here, if you don't mind. Alright. I'm going to go... try to go a little bit darker. Not liking this synthetic brush and how it breaks apart. Fans apart so easily. Okay. Not blended in very well here. Going to use a little bit of dirty water to see if I can blend it out. Excuse me. I'll let it pull up where I feel it's gonna look cool. Okay, that helped a bit. Okay, we get the idea. So I did start off with a layer of sort of a mid-tone, and I really like how I'm capturing, you know, darker to darker. Let's see if I can go a little bit darker. And then I need to move on. Let me check my timing. I've gone a little less than an hour, so far so good. Not going to go all the way up. But I want to get to the point where the brush is dry. Okay. One more time. Okay. Alright, sort of the effect I would like to achieve through the figure study process. So I'm going to keep working on that, and I'm hoping that I can scale this down to working with smaller, a little bit smaller figures. Obviously a big circular shape, it is great practice, but trying to bring it down into smaller recognizable forms could be more of a challenge, of course. And as this is dried, and I'm kind of dry brushing in a little bit more darker areas, it gives us a little bit more sense of realism of what's going on. All right, excellent. Let's move on. this one off. Oops, I kind of bent it a little too much. Okay. So not bad. Somewhat productive start. Good practice and sort of studies with observing our model, the picture of our model, and seeing how far we can take ink wash before it becomes unrecognizable. So even looking at this here, I just don't see enough information to redraw it out. So this tone to start off with was just a little bit too dark, which is why we practice with that simpler shape. Okay. Now, I'll go ahead and tidy up. Amazing how messy just a couple drops of ink and some water can be. Go through and wipe up my ink. Then I'll start getting ready for working on the Mission Decontrol comic strip. Okay, got it all wiped out and cleaned up. Alright, a little bit messy on my fingers, but hopefully it doesn't get in the way of anything. Alright, I'm just going to put my watercolor paper away. We're going to get out our 14-inch by 17-inch bristle board sheet. Let's do a camera adjustment. Okay, it's hard to see, but I'm going to do my best to quickly get it to the point where it's more visible with the pencil work that I'm going to do. I'm not going to do really clean printed comic book type of clean artwork, right, for the pencil. I'm going to make this fairly rough. I want to get this done quickly. That way I can get to the point where I can draw these out quickly, sketch these out quickly, lay out my composition of titles, narration, dialogue, sound effects, action, characters, keeping all the things balanced for that good composition. And if I wanted to, I could spend more hours cleaning up the pencil work so I have clean gradation of shading and highlights, detail and textures using graphite. And I would love to do that on some parts, maybe on some pages, but that's if I want to use that for printed. Uh-oh. You know what? Did I freeze up? There we go. Hopefully there wasn't connection lost or anything like that? I'll keep an eye on the streams. Oh, that's not good. I don't know what happened. Maybe there was an internet hiccup. I'll continue to talk about what I was talking about, but this comic book page is going to be used as more of a serialized comic strip, as you would see in an old newspaper comic book section or comic section, which you don't see newspapers around these days. Comic strips aren't used like they were before, but comic strips can still be used to be posted on social media. It's just going to be formatted differently. So I have it formatted with the title panel, which is panel 1. Panel 2 starts the story with our character D-Control. He's flying his cargo ship in space, and he is in hyperspace, and he's complaining to himself how much money he's being paid to haul this cargo, but the cargo isn't what he expected it to be, right? So he's got some suspicion as to why he was hired to haul a bunch of cargo that's not really that important. He's getting paid for it, when all of a sudden he becomes interdicted and pulled out of hyperspace by pirates. We're going to finish off the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panel comic book strip with pirates ready to pounce on D-Control. What's going on in this story? Why is he dealing with such a situation? It's sort of part of the video game that I like to play, Star Citizen, and it sort of mimics or parallels that sort of universe. The video game Star Citizen is a futuristic game set in the 30th century, and my character is a sort of mimic of my character in the game that I've created. It's a lot of fun. We just fly ships around, we shoot things, we haul things, we sell things, but your whole point is to survive. Just like in this comic book where D-Control is just trying to survive. He's trying to make money. He's trying to, not really trying to be the most advanced in what he does, but I guess he's probably more of a chill person that just finds himself in very odd situations. And I want to have fun with this. As far as the tone, the story tone, this is science fiction, cyberpunk, a little bit of pulp, hopefully. Thus, the drawing style and the inking style, or the finished product, maybe just generic illustrations of cyberpunk based stuff. There won't be a whole lot of detail in these unless I do bigger panels. Okay. So there is plenty of narration to help sort of start the story. I don't give away all details, whether I have it formed or not. And sometimes I ask questions out loud, and if anybody has any sort of feedback, something they like or don't like, how they would make it better. It's not a guarantee that is something that I would use, but I'm all for feedback. Okay, I had thought of a change. Also, by the way, I'm practicing with these streams. It's pretty, it's one thing just to go through and draw stuff out and make it look the way that you're trying to make it look. Putting a lot of work into it, focusing. The only thing distracting you is, some music in your headphones. But streaming is a whole different beast, right? I spent several years teaching, not as a certified teacher, but running, clubs and camps, instructional kind of stuff. How's everything looking here? Should I move this up? Yeah, move this up on the vertical layout. Whoops. Okay. Sorry if I got sidetracked on what I was talking about, but I was thinking of changing this, taking out the headshot of the character decontrol, and then sort of putting a silhouette inside of this planetary. Originally, I had sort of like a planet behind them, a space station that's been erased out, because I do want to put dialogue in here. Excuse me, narration. And so I was thinking, well, I don't have to put his headshot in there. That's just a sort of generic placeholder I was thinking of. It may stay. But I could erase him out and put a cool silhouette of him, sort of inside the planetary shape, and have some sort of black and white light effect. But I haven't really played around with the idea enough to be ready to erase all this out and draw it in. But yeah, I was just thinking maybe just a silhouette of something, or of him. You see his mohawk, so he's recognizable. Maybe he's carrying his helmet or something like that, his space helmet. I'll think about that. That may be somewhat of a bigger change over here than I realize. But here we have our title. We see his cargo ship flying across the panel, drawn in very lightly. Alright, I am going to bring the camera in a little bit closer. I'm going to make some camera focus adjustments. Oop, there we go, right there. Yeah. I'm going to go and drop the... I'll keep that exposure there. Contrast is at 128. I only have one light source, so it's kind of throws it off. I'll just leave it like that for now. Let's try brightness. Alright, I'll just leave it there for now. That's a little bit better. I'll keep an eye on that. Okay. Adjusting contrast, brightness, exposure, focus should be good. And if it gets out of whack, I'll try to catch it as quickly as I can. But I want to keep the camera at this level. See if I can move my light source out of the way a little bit. It's pretty bright in that corner. Okay, whatever. Got to meet in the middle there and work with it. Cool. All right, I'm going to start off checking the time real quick. Let me get a drink of water. I'm going to focus sort of silently. I'm not going to talk out loud or jibber jabber too much. I'm going to focus on reading over this, and I may sort of lay out this panel here that I adjusted yesterday. And talking about creating this in a way that's a little bit rough, a lot of even some of the lettering for onomatopoeia may just be hand or eyeballed in versus guided with straight edges. So I may freehand a lot of stuff. Now, if this was a page for a printed comic book, I would definitely put more time into using guides, curves, and ellipses, stuff like that to help create a higher quality illustration, or a more detailed illustration, I guess. This is the onomatopoeia, the beep. Maybe it's a beep, beep, beep. What's a warning sound going to be like? Is it going to be super loud? I think this would be a P. Just big block lettering. And I am drawing guidelines for the lettering. But I'm freehanding, curves and stuff like that. And I feel pretty confident that, I can keep that fairly straight. But if I get stuck and feel that I'm not doing a good enough job, then I will break out the necessary tools. Alright. Beep, beep. Time to get up. Same thing with this ellipse here. Which is not a button, but a light. Like a plastic covering with a little bulb inside. And we're looking down at that light cover, which would be a red. And I think it's got some sort of like ribbing on the inside or texture lines. Roundish, rounded, it's got a sort of a hard edge on the top or flat surface on the top, like it was a ball sort of sliced on that part. Yeah, when I come through with mechanical pens to ink, like the panels on the spaceship kind of area, then I'll have straight edges and curves and stuff like that that I'll use to make those look good. Sharpen my lead point here a little bit. I'll rethink the seams on this. Let's just get the basic shapes. Drawn in. Nice and dark. I'm going to go ahead and just eyeball these angles. Hope everything is still running okay. Looks like stream is still going. Okay, all right. I'm going to add in some hatch strokes in here. Just to sort of help imply the the intensity. Get in a little bit closer. That looks good. I gotta make sure I get his beard in. I'll go ahead and leave this panel the way it is, I think. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes. I'll commit to it. try to pencil in a little bit of texturing and parts where I want to do some hatching. So I'm starting to fit in some more finishing touches. I do have to consider the under helmet that he should be wearing as well. How am I doing on time? The wording I have in here, "Welcome to my humble home," said the spider to the fly. He's thinking to himself, so it's not a word balloon, but a narration box. And I think I should still have plenty of space in here. I'm going to do more outlining than detailing because I still want to figure out lighting and shadows. I've got one of my streams on. So I kept hearing myself, and one of my streams is not muted. There we go. I feel like I need to incorporate some personal weapons here on this panel somehow. I wonder if he needs to sort of have a rifle or something attached to the back of his pilot chair. and start identifying the areas that are maybe solid black or really, really dark. I do want to use hatching. For some of this, so this would be the inside of the helmet. He's taking it off, so we see the helmet upside down. Okay, let me check my time here because I don't have a whole lot of time left. And shoot, in fact, I probably should have stopped a little while ago. Okay, I wish I got more done today, just for the stream. Unfortunately, my time is short for this afternoon. If for any reason I'm able to stream some more later on, I did consider actually doing a little bit more art and then transitioning into some gaming to share a little bit of what inspires this story and this comic and stuff like that. Alright, let me see if I can get a better view here. I might have to reset my camera. Let's do that. Okay, so I've gone through and just kind of shaded some stuff in. I really put more effort into these couple of panels over here to kind of darken them in, to bring out the onomatopoeia shapes, to bring out the character shape, and then start adding in where I want, lighting effects, shadow effects. I may need to do a little bit of work offline to kind of keep up with it. I'm not getting as much done through the stream, which is okay. It's sort of to be expected. Okay, but hopefully I have enough to sort of post a little bit of an update today. Maybe this weekend I'll get to the point to where I'm inking and recording and sharing that. And I forgot to record today, but at least I'm streaming. All right. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all I can do for today for this stream or to share. So we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up. Yeah, definitely a challenge balancing streaming, keeping an eye on things, staying comfortable and focused. We just keep trying, keep going, keep practicing, and get better and better as we go. But as far as this weekend goes and streaming for this weekend, possibly tomorrow on Saturday. Won't be available on Sunday. And then Monday's always kind of starting things back up. So hopefully I'll stream tomorrow. If not, I will be back on Monday. Thank you for those that were hanging out. I really appreciate it. If you're just kind of lurking and watching and listening, I hope you had a little bit of fun hanging out with me. I know I did have fun.